question is, when you started do with knives, how old were you?
I started trying to make knives when I was probably 8 or 9. I wasn't very successful at it until I was 26.
When you did your first knife, how old were you?
Oh, I don't know. Probably 9 or 10 years old.
How long do you practice in these manufacturing knives?
Professionally, I've been making knives since 2001, and I have about 28,000 hours making knives. So my first professional quality knives were in 2001.
Could you mind to share with us, do you have any certain steps of making a knife?
I learned how to forge first. That was the first thing I learned in 2001. I used to just grind blades. I would just cut them out of a saw blade and grind them, but now I make them by forging. So first you have to design it. First you draw it. You say, oh, will that knife work? Will that be what I want? Will that be a good knife for whatever I'm using it for? Or is it just fantasy or art? Oh, well, I design, I forge, I grind, I heat treat, and then all those little details to finish. You know, do I want it to be polished, or, you know, it all depends on what kind of knife it is. But my first technique is I design it, I forge it, and then I grind it, and then I do all the metallurgy, the heat treating, and then I begin all the finishing, the polishing stages. Mm-hmm. The hardest part is designing. You know, that's the hardest part, is to design it.
Do you practice a knife fighting?
Oh, yes, Kali. I do Kali with Doug Markida.
What actually punched you that you started working with a knife, like knife fighting?
I don't know. Don't want to hear. I've not been in a knife fight. Well, it's something that I've always been in different types of martial arts, and a knife is, I've always carried knives. I've always had big knives. So where I live is a 100-year-old swamp. I mean, the trees are 1,500 years old. It's very old forest. And I've always used the big knives, so it's just kind of a natural second thing to me, is to have that in my hand. So if I ever needed the knife as a weapon, it's a very easy one, because I have it, you know, it's right there in my hand, and I know how to use it anyway. So refining that by studying the Kali simplifies any technique for self-defense.
Could you mind to share with us any certain kind of knives that you like more to make it?
Yes. I like ones that are challenging, you know, a new idea. So if it's a difficult piece, I'm trying to figure out how to make it, that's my favorite, as long as I have time to make it. So most of the time I'm in a big hurry to make stuff and can't catch my breath, you know, trying to take time to just breathe. But I like to make kukris, and I like to make fighters, but I like to take a lot of time to do them. But right now I'm making knives like crazy.
So, if you are practicing the Kali, how do you think? Does it important to have some psychological preparation before you started to practice some martial arts like Kali?
Well, it's not like practicing with a gun, you know. It's really difficult to think about that, because I don't ever want to get into a knife fight, ever. But it's just thinking about something. It helps me think, mostly. You know, practicing the Kali just helps me think. You know, how does this knife work? How does this used? But it's it scares me. I don't want to get in a knife. I don't want to have any kind of knife fight. So that's a hard question. I don't know how you psychologically prepare for it. You just practice it and hope you never use anything. You hope you never have to use it.
What is the knife for you?
Oh, chef's knife, kitchen knife. Because I like to eat food, so that's my knife.
What is actually punched you that you decided to start to choose your profession, like to make a knife?
Well, that's good. I was a designer and an artist, but I would make knives every now and then. That's what I always wanted to do, was to make knives. I just didn't know how. So when I was a kid, my dad would read Edgar Rice Burroughs, John Carter of Mars and Tarzan and stuff like that. And so they had knives and swords, and he would tell me, he goes, "Oh, you're going to go to Mars and you're going to need a sword." He would tell me this crazy stuff, and I'd be like, "Okay, yeah, I'm going to need this." So it was one of the things I felt like I needed to learn, but because I was always using the knives in the woods, clearing trails and stuff, it just made me want more and more to learn how to make them. And when I began making knives, I was good at it. I didn't go back to doing anything else. I just kept making more knives because it fit me well. I was good at making them.
Are there any differences of making different kinds of knives?
Oh, yeah. Yes, I understand. Well, yeah, they all kind of start out the same. I'm using the same techniques. The shape is just different. So pretty much all the techniques are the same, but shaping the blade, the shape of the blade becomes different. So it's not a lot of difference. Different knife, different shape. That's all. It doesn't really. The technique is not very different. It's just a different size and shape. So I'm using the same techniques to make these knives. So very similar. I hope that makes sense.
For example, I know that to make a knife, you have to do some steps. Take material, put it in the oven, forge it. Do you have steps like this?
Oh, yeah. Well, forge. Once I'm done forging, I begin to do some of the heat treating. That's the hardening and tempering, but I don't, it's not all happening at once. Then I grind it, and then I harden it and temper it. And then I have to go back and grind it again, finer and finer to get the finish that I want on the blade. And then I'll put the handle on it and shape the handle.
So you're making your knives, but for what?
Oh, because I have to. I make them, it's my passion. It's what I want to do. I don't care if I sell them or not. If somebody buys them, that's great. And if they don't, I don't care, because I have to make knives. It's just in me, and I have to make them.
If I understood right, that all your life is doing for these knives, for this making of knives, right?
Yeah, it's my art. It's my art. So making the knives is how I'm expressing my art. It all depends on what I'm thinking. I might give you an example. I lived in New York City for 4 months, and you can only have a little teeny knife like this, something really small. So I had to figure out a little knife that I could carry in the city, because anything else was illegal. Having a folding knife, that's not legal, and everything else. So it just made me say, hey, I'll design a little knife that I can carry in the city. So that's one thing. And so I draw it out and design it, and then I'll make it. And if other people like it, I'll keep making them. But if no one responds, like if nobody really likes it, then I only make 1 or 2. And sometimes I'll just draw. I'm just drawing. I'm thinking of an idea. I was like, oh, I want to make that. So I'll draw out the knife, and if I like the way it looks, then I'll continue it, and I'll make another one, and I'll put it into steel. I'll make it into a real knife, and then I'll test it. I'll go and chop the trees down, like all back here in these woods. I'll cut them all down, and maybe I'll make it again.
Could you mind to share with us, how do you see a future after 10 years?
Well, I'll keep making knives, I think, but I do other things too. Sometimes I build a motorcycle. Sometimes I build a car. Right now, I've kind of been traveling around the United States, and hopefully next year I'll be in Europe. So I'm going to go to Belgium and France, and I want to visit all the knife makers that I'm friends with around the world. So from all across Europe and into Russia, down into Thailand and places like that, and then back into the United States, in Alaska, and come back down. So that's what I want to do over the next 10 years. But I'm also having my designs produced, like my design will be produced by other manufacturers, and then I'll sell them and still make my originals. But I really want to travel around the world and work with other makers, in Russia or wherever, anywhere.
So how do you think, does knife has some future in 21st century?
Oh yeah, well, people like to make things, people like to make, and especially here, everyone is getting tired of what they buy in the store. So there's a renaissance in being able to make, and that process of forging blades or forging tools, that way of making things, that's becoming very popular. So if anything, more and more people will learn how to make forge blades or whatever they're making. It could be any kind of art, but I'm specifically thinking knives. So more and more people want to be able to learn how to make. So I like to share the information, and I teach people too.
Can you share how to understand who is the real blacksmith and who is not real?
Oh, so to me, a real bladesmith, you're heating up steel in the fire and you're shaping it with a hammer. That's real forging. That's real bladesmithing and blacksmithing. I've met a lot of people over the last 2 years who tell me, "Oh yeah, I'm a bladesmith. I know how to make stuff." They don't even have an anvil. They don't have any. They don't do that. They just cut them out and grind them. So the real bladesmith is the one who has the passion and has the willingness to learn. A lot of people, they think they know it all. I don't know it all. I'm a student, so I'm always trying to learn.
What can you recommend to the people that decided to start making knives?
Oh, learn. Be a good student and study the other knife makers. But when you want to develop your own style, don't look at knives. You have to look at Rembrandt, or you look at things like that. You don't look at knives to get ideas. You look at really good art or architecture or beautiful women, and then you have a good idea as to how to design your knife.
Could you mind to share with us, how did you find your own style of these knives?
Oh, little subtleties. I would see a curve that I liked, some kind of curve or line, and I would add that into my knife. But I would make sure it was useful, and that's how I developed my own style. So that happened really fast for me. Early on, like 2002, I really zeroed in on my lines, the curves. I like the knives with the curves. So that's how I developed my style. I wasn't afraid to break the rules and change the tradition. I didn't mind changing the tradition or saying, no, I don't want to do it this old way. I want to do it my way.
Could you mind to share with us something interesting about your knives that we didn't ask you? Do they have some advantages from other knives in the world?
Most people who make knives, they don't test their knives. They don't use their knives. They're just making a knife. Hey, here's my knife. I made it. But they don't test them or use them. And I test all of them. I make sure they all work. So if I'm making a knife for hunting wild hogs, I went and used it on the wild hogs. Or if I am making a knife for the kitchen, I go and I test it in the kitchen. I make sure it works, and I'll refine it until I have it fine-tuned and functioning properly. One of the things, I guess, I would rather make the knives and give them to somebody that I love than sell them. But I sell them because that's my job and I have to make more knives.
Jason, how many knives did you remake in your life?
Oh, remake, yeah. Well, those I'll test them until they're destroyed. Like I'll test the knife to destruction, and then I'll refine the design and the things that I didn't like. I eliminate. So I spend a lot of time. So I keep refining a knife and refining a knife. So no one knows how many different designs I went through just to produce one piece. One good design. I went through a lot of different designs to get that one design right because I keep testing and testing.
Is it possible for you to tell us how many knives approximately you already made?
Oh man, I don't know. Every year I've averaged making about 160 knives every year. So for the last 16 years, I've made about 150, 160 knives every year for 16 years since I started.